anatomy. I mean...
So this is a how to play Flesh and Blood.
This is how to play Flesh and Blood. We all have to start somewhere. My first question is, are you familiar with card games?
Vaguely, yes.
Good, so I only have to explain shuffling.
Correct.
Excellent. Let's start off with explaining the anatomy of the card. There are 5 zones. First, we'll talk about resource cost to play the card. This card is free, 0. To play this card requires 1 resource. To play this card requires 2 resources.
Okay.
With me? Excellent. Now, in order to generate resources, we pitch cards. I'll explain what pitching is in a second, but this red strip corresponds with this 1 pip. If you pitch this card, it generates 1 resource.
Okay.
If you pitch this yellow strip card corresponding to 2 pips, you generate 2 resources. And last but not least, if you generate this blue card, surprise, surprise, 3 resources.
Excellent.
Now, the pitching mechanic is unique in this game. I have here a fully randomized deck. It's shuffled. It's part of the game. I have no clue what's in there. I have a 3-card hand. I want to play this Whirling Mist Blossom. It costs 1 resource. What I need to do in order to pay for it is I need to take a card from my hand and I need to pitch a card. I'm not discarding it. I'm not sacrificing it. I'm not banishing it. I'm not exiling it. I am pitching it. Pitching this 1 card, as we remember, the red corresponds to 1 pip. 1 resource would pay for the 1 card. Alternatively, I could have pitched this blue card, which again, as you remember, generates 3 resources. The 1 resource from this card could be used to pay for this 1. At the end of my turn, any excess pitch that floats, I can use this pitch to play for anything for the rest of the turn. At the end of the turn, this pitch tip goes away, and a unique mechanic comes in. This card goes underneath my deck. So maybe within 9 to 10 turns, I'm going to see that card again. You will know the cards that you will draw at that point because you pitched and put those cards underneath your deck.
So what happens if there's more than 1 card here?
Sorry to interrupt. When you are done, can you go sit close?
Of course. Over time, what happens is as you draw cards, this deck gets thinner and thinner, and eventually you'll hit what's called the pitch stack. And in the pitch stack, every card that's in the pitch stack is a card that you have pitched previously, and so you can set up for future turns sometimes. Late in the game, if you think your opponent's going to try and slow you down, you can set up high-powered attacks for the end game, or you might mix it up and just go all in and go play all your red cards, be very aggressive, but at the end of the game, all your attacks are going to be really weak because they're all going to be blue attacks. So there is strategy in determining. Now, we have 3 more zones. Are you still with me?
Yep.
Excellent. So these are attacks we use to attack. Everything with a yellow arrow is an attack. So this card here does not have a yellow arrow. It is not an attack. Obviously, the bigger the number, the more powerful the attack. Next category, defense. Next to the shield is a number. This is a number that you can use to block a card. Now, to give you an example of what it looks like when you do attack. You can attack you for 5 damage. You don't want to take that damage. You have 2 cards in hand. So what you're going to do, you can block with 1 or more cards from your hand to block the damage. Now, as a reminder, when you are blocking with a card from hand, you ignore the rest of the text. You're not paying for a cost. There are no action points, no resources. There's no text on the card. Instead, all you see is the block value 2 and 2. So in this case, 5 minus 4, 1. This is when you're blocking with the card. Moving on, we have 1 extra section. We have the card text. Reading the card explains the card. Perfect? Excellent! We've explained the pitch mechanic. Now we move on to the action points. This game is, we have 2 heroes, we enter an arena, only 1 can be a winner. But that doesn't mean we have to be brutes. We can be civilized. We take turns punching each other in the face. So, if you're the attacking player at the beginning of the turn, you have 1 action point. You can spend the 1 action point to play an action. After this card is done, your turn is over. How? Unless you play a card with the word go again. If you play a card with go again, after this is done, you can play another card. If you happen to play another card with the word go again, you can go again with another action. On and on until you're out of cards, out of resources, etc., etc. Now, we have 2 more areas to cover. You feeling good?
Yep.
Excellent. Let us move to the next part. This is your hero. You have 20 life. You run out of life, bad things happen. Next concept, intellect. At the end of your turn, you draw up to your intellect. If you have no cards in your hand at the end of your turn, you draw 4 cards. If you have 1 card in your hand at the end of the turn, you draw 3 cards. So, it's good to optimize the usage of your cards in your hand. We have one more thing to discuss before the gameplay mechanics have been discussed, and that is the arsenal. It's a little hard, so hopefully bear with me. This is the arsenal slot.
Okay.
At the end of your turn, if you have 1 or more cards in your hand, you can take a card in your hand and put it face down in the arsenal as a hidden card.
Okay.
Now, after you do this, you do the check to determine how many cards you have in your hand to draw cards. So if you have 1 card in hand, putting a card in your arsenal lets you draw 4 cards. But treat this arsenal as an imaginary 5th card slot. But there are 3 restrictions that you need to take care of. The first restriction is, this is in your arsenal. You cannot pitch it to generate resources because it's not a card in your hand. Second, you cannot defend with this card from the arsenal because it is not a card in your hand. However, if you have a defense reaction, you can play a defense reaction from arsenal, and you're not because you're playing and not defending from hand. Third, the third point is you have 1 arsenal slot. You cannot refill this arsenal slot until this slot is empty, which means you need to play a card. So if you have a 1 card in hand and 1 card in arsenal, you cannot arsenal until it's done. And that concludes the Learn to Play intro for Flesh and Blood. Thank you very much.
Yay!